The loudspeaker spoke up and said,
Greetings from just off Orwell Lane. The spirit of the pioneer is staunchly ingrained into the very fabric of what used to be a cohesive American culture. It is no surprise, then, that the great-grandfathers of the graphic novel come from an age of American history where this spirit thrived. One of these men, Lynd Ward, served as not just a forerunner for the graphic novel as we know it today, but an intrepid foundation that the giants who moved comic books into their modern definition stood upon. Will Eisner, himself the namesake for what used to be a prestigious and coveted award, the comic book equivalent to the Oscar, if you will, once described Ward as the father of the pure ultimate visual. Later in his career, when discussing the vibrancy of Ward's work again, Eisner would lament that, quote, "I've tried to reach that same mountaintop and have never been able to do it," unquote. Other artists have also marveled at Ward's wordless novels over the years. Allen Ginsberg dedicated a portion of Wild Pilgrimage as the inspiration for his famous poem Howl. The film director Guillermo del Toro listed Ward multiple times as a key visual influence on his style, and in 2015 cited Ward's wordless novels as, quote, "combining a modern graphic approach with an Old Testament damnation. Fearsome," unquote. Despite these accolades, Ward and his body of work are relatively unknown today. Here on the farm, I personally was not aware of him until Mrs. Aldous brought him to my attention several years back when she gave me a copy of David Barona's book, Wordless Books, the original graphic novels. While his body of work is quite substantial, and he led a fairly long life from 1905 until his death in 1985, it is really just a small selection of those works that seem to resonate most. One of those in particular. Ward's first commission work came in 1928, doing illustrations for The Begging Deer, stories of Japanese children, with technically simple yet emotionally powerful brush drawings. In 1929, with the follow-up book, Prince Bantam, Ward also provided illustrations in the same format that showed a growth of style. And it was this growth of style and the evolution of his own perception of what his art could do that he decided to do his own book, and thus led to the creation of the wordless novel, God's Man. No doubt, Ward was inspired by Nuckel's Destiny from 1926, and Ward himself admitted to being moved by Masriel's Disown. The German wave of the expressionist style that was sweeping the country at that time had a lasting impact. God's Man hit the market exactly 1 week before the stock market crash of 1929. It would go on to sell 20,000 copies, which it didn't make it a tremendous success, but it was no small feat either. The book was exceptionally unique in that it printed images from the woodcuts were only on the right-hand side of the page, giving it almost a flip book sense than anything else. The removal of any associated text that had always accompanied such works before furthered the imaginative expression Ward was reaching out towards. God's Man consisted of 139 wordless prints of Ward's wood etchings. The story follows the journey of a young artist who signs a contract with a stranger in exchange for a magic paintbrush. It is not long after that he finds immediate fame and is blessed with a life of wealth and luxury. It is soon thereafter that he becomes disillusioned with his newfound success and ill receives it and all of the trappings that come with it and fame. And he lashes out. And he awakens to find himself imprisoned. He escapes his confines and begins to be chased by a mob. And he leaps off a high cliff. There he awakes to be rescued by a mysterious woman who lives in the woods outside of town, and with her he slowly recovers. The two eventually fall in love and marry and live quietly. One day, the stranger returns, turning up on their doorstep and asking for a portrait to be painted with the magic brush. The artist agrees, and the stranger removes his mask to reveal a terrible visage. This drives the artist mad, and again he flees up to the same cliff and falls to his death, over the original cliff that he jumped over. The stranger with the terrible face has extracted his price for the brush and all that it brought. Now that story is told somewhere between the stoic linearity that you would become to expect at the time from the expressionist style, but it also has a stark beauty that carries traces of an Art Deco influence with some Art Nouveau suggestibility. In short, it is a true work of American transcendental art. From 1930 to 1937, Ward would go on to produce 5 more such works: Madman's Drum, the previously mentioned Wild Pilgrimage, Prelude to a Million Years, Songs Without Words, and Vertigo. Here on the farm, we don't think any have the same emotional impact of God's Man, though. Maybe that's because it was his first, maybe it's because it is something special. But in each of these stories, Ward would take on a different topic, be it the slave trade or the Depression, the Industrial Revolution, and weave it into a story that was just emotionally impactful. While Ward would go on to do many other illustrations outside of these works, and multiple collaborations, it is these 6 woodcut, wordless novels that would have his strongest and most lasting influence on successive generations. Simple wood engravings and cuts though they may be, all of Ward's works feature an expression of motion, especially human motion, which for a static image has an uncanny fluidity to it that draws the reader through the image. The books are unique in that the images are only published on the right-hand side of the page, and perhaps some would say it is more reminiscent of a flip book, as I previously stated. And for the layman, maybe Ward's work doesn't come across as anything other than that. And here on the farm, we can completely understand that perception. Art is subjective. And one of the most majestic things about it is how a piece can simultaneously inspire one while eliciting no emotion in the other. But one thing you can't argue about, that Ward's work is many things, and the legacy of the inspiration that it has brought for almost 100 years is undeniable. I strongly recommend you check out God's Man by Lynd Ward if you appreciate comic books. I am Aldous on the Farm. Thank you for watching.